Lesson B3, Subcultures and Status. America as a whole is in many ways a melting pot, with many different ethnic groups influencing the overall culture. But within any one large ethnic grouping, there are still important differences. As a culture changes, some groups or aspects of society may diverge from the dominant culture. Even within a single subculture, expected norms differ depending on the situation and a person's status. Sagging your pants may be normal fashion for a young person in the USA, while an older person may see such behavior as sloppy. A wealthy person may drink cocktails at a golf game, while a working-class person may prefer beer at a football game. Women traditionally may wear dresses, while many would consider a man doing the same to be quite deviant. Culture lag, or some aspects or groups in society changing faster than others, can cause resentment, violence, and many potential dysfunctions in social structures. One common cause of culture lag in industrial and post-industrial societies is that the material culture of technology can change far faster than formal norms and values. Informal norms can adapt quickly, especially among those most accustomed to changing technology. Texting and driving has become a major danger that law enforcement struggles to control, but it is more than twice as common among millennials, born in the 2 decades before 2000, than among baby boomers, born in the middle of the century. Culture lag can take the form of generation gaps, as young people tend to place high value in progress, while older people tend to prioritize tradition. Culture shock between generations, with each assuming ethnocentrically that its own ways are best, can lead to ageism. It has been said that America is heaven for the young and hell for the old, but both may suffer from age stereotypes and discrimination. This chart makes humorous comparisons between generational cultures. Norms of work, sex, music, and life goals have changed greatly. Lee Iacocca, automobile innovator born in 1924, and Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook founder born in 1984, display very different role norms in the status of business leader. These differences hint at both a difference in generational culture and in the subcultures associated with particular industries. Within any culture, often among adolescents, which we'll talk about in the next module, subcultures can diverge from the dominant culture, with new styles of dress, speech, behavior, and even values and beliefs. When Simba befriends Timon and Pumbaa, he learns their norms of jungle living and eating grubs, and also their value of Hakuna Matata, no worries, very different than the culture on the savannah where he came from with the pride. But is every deviance a new cultural norm? Not if only a few individuals are innovating within their own personality. But when others begin to learn from them, and it diffuses out into a larger group, then it becomes a cultural trait. Subcultures often develop around a shared activity or interest. For punks, it was the styles and attitudes developed in punk music. Nerds had to fight to reclaim the label and roles others placed upon them for their interest in activities formerly seen as uncool. For jocks, it was the norms of sport teams. For each of these groups, different values led to different cultural capital, the knowledge, skills, looks, and possessions that are seen as valuable within that group. For punks, it might be your mohawk and your knowledge of punk rock bands that give you high status, while for jocks, it might be your jersey and athletic skill. All of this can lead to increasing social capital as well, which is a general notion of prestige and your social network. Who do you know? Hipsters are an interesting subculture in that almost no one claims to be a hipster. It's a label placed by other people. Hipsters generally reject the notion that they fit into a specific group, valuing instead the ideals of independence and cultural freedom. Yet in reality, together they superficially assimilate traits from other cultures, with no particular appreciation of their symbolic meaning. As they are commonly members of the dominant cultural group, members of minority groups may take offense at their use of other groups' cultural capital. Subcultures can also develop from the influence of ethnic groups on the fringes of the dominant culture. Amish immigrants eventually became a counterculture when they rejected the changing norms and new technologies of the larger American society. African Americans were long segregated against their will, causing some cultural diversions, and some rejected assimilation as a means of acceptance, instead forming groups like the Black Panthers to fight against racism and white European dominance. When such countercultural movements use violence in their opposition, they are often labeled terrorists. But hippies, who rejected violence, were perhaps the best-known American counterculture, breaking from the dominant group to pursue new norms and values. While the hyenas are presented as the bad guys in The Lion King, one could argue that they are a counterculture that formed after generations of segregation from the dominant society. So when we say that countercultures, as a kind of subculture that rejects aspects of the dominant culture, what does that mean in a multicultural society? The dominant culture is generally that of the most powerful group, and it is their cultural capital that holds the greatest value for most official statuses. So while a mohawk may make you a good punk, it will likely get you fired from most professional jobs. Henry Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company, hired recent immigrants to work in his factories and tried to help them succeed in American society. He did so in a rite of passage which he called the melting pot, in which they climbed into a giant pot wearing their traditional clothing and emerged not with a mixture of cultural traits, but in the clothes of the dominant WASP, which is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, culture. They left their own ethnic cultural capital behind to assimilate to that considered valuable by the dominant group. Finally, even within that dominant group, there are cultural differences based on class. The most common form of cultural capital is that of popular culture, the cultural norms available to average members of society: football, beer, rap, pop, and country music. But the highest value is placed on the cultural capital of the social elites, the wealthiest and most powerful members of society. This is high culture. If you want to impress a politician or CEO, you don't take them to a football game, but to a golf club.